Hello everybody, welcome to topic 8, participation. This topic is looking at the whole issue of participation in the context of community enterprise, which we recognise is a significant part of what characterises community enterprises in the first place. Our topic has been created by me, Bridget Kerwin, as part of the two partners, and my colleague Kieran Lynch, who is part of Communities Creating Jobs. I'm going to be looking at this first topic, which is introducing the concept of participation and perhaps identifying some of the challenges there are to participation in the context of community enterprise. The objective for today is to develop an understanding of what we mean by participation and to look at some of the mechanisms for engagement and participation for community enterprises. One of the challenges with community enterprises and participation is that we recognise that participation is a key element of it. It's also part of the social foundation for the community enterprise, and it makes it different than a social enterprise. It makes it different from a standard business. But the challenge of participation is not simple. Buchanan suggested that this whole area of participation should be seen as the idea of a community, an enterprise developed within or embedded within a community itself, within a political community, within a social community. And for that reason, then we should see this whole participation project as one around developing democratic engagement with the enterprise itself. We're going to look at different forms of engagement and the implications of those different forms of engagement. And particularly Kieran's going to be looking at how to use the engagement well for the community enterprise. When we talk about community participation, as I said, it's really seen to be key for a community enterprise. And these concepts, these ideas of community engagement, trust building and accountability are key characteristics of participation from a community enterprise context. Another concept that we're going to look at is the extent to which there is local ownership and control of the enterprise. Who gets to be the owner of the company or the organization, and how do they get to participate? When we are looking at our community enterprise, I suppose one of our key goals is that there is trust in the enterprise itself. Some words that we associate with trust, which have implications for how we encourage or engage in participation, is about reliability. It's about doing what it says on the tin. And are you reliable in whatever service we deliver for our community? How predictable can we be? Like, do we always do what we said we were going to do when we said we were going to do it? Have we built up credibility because of perhaps being reliable, being predictable, and then people trust us within our own community? And that's really key. Another element that's a word that's sometimes used with the idea of participation is compassion. And we'll perhaps bring that up again a little bit later on. But is your community enterprise seen as compassionate within the community in which it works? Now, these four words are words that I've built up in the context of my understanding of trust. But for your own community enterprise, what other words might you add in terms of building trust by the community in your enterprise? Kieran's going to talk about a little bit later on about kind of levels of engagement, but it's an ideal way to start thinking about how we encourage participation, and also to make it clear for ourselves that we don't have to have, we will have different levels of engagement or different levels of participation. This little diagram shows something from all the way from people who will probably watch your community enterprise but might not have any further engagement with it than that. They're just keeping an eye, they know it exists, but they're not necessarily going to be very involved with it. All the way up through people who will follow what's happening, maybe have some engagement, kind of might share your like Facebook posts or social media posts, but won't be more involved than that. All the way up through endorsing, contributing and owning and leading. And this is probably the key bit of the participation bit of it. I mean, I think in any volunteering, it's important to understand that there will be some people who will take on leadership and ownership and contributing roles. But for the vast majority of people who are interested in and supportive of your community enterprise, they're not all going to be equally involved. And equally, their engagement and your expectations around how you encourage them to participate will be different. Some kind of the technical considerations in terms of participation might be like, who will you allow to join your organisation and your community enterprise? Will it be everybody in the community? Will it be people who are likely to benefit? It's hard to be prescriptive, and it's about kind of making a decision as a group who will be the membership. I know in the case studies that you might have watched in the last few days, different community enterprises have taken different approaches to this idea of membership. Like, and then when they have determined who will be membership, they kind of look at who will everybody be the same in terms of their engagement with it. Will some people be members because they offer money? Will some people be members because they engage every day with it? What is the nature of the membership? And this is an important part of the participation part of it. And then will there be other people who are funders or supporters, but not necessarily engaged in an everyday piece with your community enterprise. So membership is a key question in the context of participation. And the second question then, apart from membership, what will be their role? So this links with our diagram earlier on. What are your expectations? Some people will just be there to offer advice. Some people will be engaged in decision making. Some people will be engaged in direction giving. For example, you might have an annual meeting in which people set out the overall direction for the enterprise, but might not be seen like in an everyday basis until the next year. There's language here in this diagram around like who will be involved in monitoring, who will set the objectives, who will set up the policies. And in reality, it will probably reflect that diagram we started out with. There'll probably be a small number of people at the top who will be the ones engaging at a deep level in the organisation, and then others who will be supporters. The other thing is then in terms of the structure of the organisation. Are you aiming for a wide spread of shareholders or members, depending on the type of structure you chose when you were looking at the governance element of it? This is important, and it relates to all the things we've said just about membership as well, is how we then encourage participation will be determined by the quantity of people and the quality of their engagement. Another question will be, who will be the beneficiaries of your community enterprise? Like, how will they participate, and then how will we build the community and engage them with our community enterprise? One of the other ideas we might come across is the idea of a community of practice. In an ideal world, everybody who engages with our community enterprise would be considered part of a community of practice. They would be bringing their collective intelligence, their knowledge, their experience, their experience to date, and bringing all that to the project. In reality, it'll probably be those people at the top who will be willing to do that. And for the vast majority of people, you will be perhaps be providing a service to others who will not necessarily be equally engaged with it. But again, to reiterate, your particular community enterprise needs to determine its own model for how you will do engagement. So as this is just the idea that essentially everybody should equally collaborate together, but our expectations might be that it's not possible to have everybody collaborating all together and at equal level all of the time. And it's just in terms of your own expectations, just to determine what's possible and what you can promise to deliver. Another concept or challenge around community enterprise and participation is, this is a guy called Pierre Bourdieu who wrote a lot about kind of engagement and participation, but was particularly interested in the idea of the capacity of people to engage. So if I have a community enterprise that's primarily designed to provide a service to perhaps disadvantaged communities in some kind of way, I need to give consideration to their capacity to engage and my commitment to their engagement through the process. So he says, kind of in terms of social capital, you'll find some people will have, at least in early stages of the project, have a capacity to engage and others will not. And the question will be, does your community enterprise, is part of its commitment developing the capacity of those people within your community to engage? And I know Kieran's going to talk a little bit later on about the difficulties there are of expecting a small number of people who run a community enterprise to take on all these levels of responsibilities of participation and engagement. So one of our key pieces in our dilemmas here is the idea of sustaining participation as well. Kieran's going to talk a little bit more about that later on. But as we work through this kind of diagram here, it talks about preliminary stages of information, which is kind of our idea of sharing information, offering opportunities for consultation, and including people at different stages. So at those preliminary stages of participation, we might create posters, ads, Facebook page, social media, and that might be the way that people at the top of our pyramid engage with us, just as people sharing the information that we have. Then we might want other types of participation in it, where we want people to engage with our decision-making process, where they get to make some decisions. And as I said, this might be where you have your annual meeting and they come along to make that decision. They might be involved in your strategic plan at that stage. And I suppose in an ideal world, we would be working in this space, which is where there's a community of practice, where everybody who is engaged in the community enterprise is contributing all of their wisdom to the process, and the community enterprise in itself becomes self-managed. In reality, it's not probably possible to imagine that for everybody who engages with your community enterprise. And as we might kind of, again, going back to our little pyramid, think that different people will engage at different levels. And just one final thought on it is the idea of sustaining participation. Very often in your community enterprise, at the beginning stages, people will be passionate and enthusiastic. But then a year or 2 years or 3 years down the road, giving consideration to how sustainable it's going to be. You know, will it be possible if the people who were engaged at the beginning move on? How will that be sustained? Do you have a transition plan? Do you have a sustainability plan for who else can become engaged with the process? And it's important to give consideration to that almost as you design your structures now. So in this topic, in this section, we've introduced lots of different kind of, I suppose, challenges with it. Coming back to the idea of trust, of credibility, of sustainability, it's the idea that do what you can do the best way you can in the line of participation, recognizing that you need to be able to sustain it to build trust in the longer term. So on that note, I'll stop and we'll move on to topic 2 in just a moment.